Harnessing the power of lightning and fire, the Spellblade is a master at diving into groups of enemies, dealing massive amounts of damage and fending off incoming attacks. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're breaking down our Spellblade build in Dragon Age the Veilguard. As a die-hard fan of the mage archetype, it was only natural for me to gravitate towards a spellcaster in Veilguard, and as you push past level 40, you really start to appreciate the different specializations each class can tap into. For this build, we're focusing on a level 40 Spellblade, a subgenre of the mage I wish more games would explore. This build combines explosive damage and dynamic movement, with the trade-off that you'll have a more limited range, which exposes you to potentially more damage. Keep in mind you can build towards this during progression. Obviously, it won't be as effective until you have everything, but it still works. With that in mind, let's dive into the skills. Now I'm going to point out every skill we take in this build, but we'll pause to explain some of the key skills that really help make this setup unique. First, we're taking Fade Strike, which I'll admit I don't use much, but it's the most logical choice and provides some effective mobility. Next, we'll take Quick Recovery, which speeds up the mana regeneration process when it's paused because of external factors. Then we pick up our first ability, Chain Lightning, which we don't actually use as part of this build. We'll also take Fade Conduit for extra initial mana, as well as Concentration for an increase to charged attack damage. From here, we're going to go up and take Elemental Catalyst, which grants us a plus 15% damage bonus based on the elemental type of our staff and orb. So if our orb is lightning, which is the case for this build, we get plus 15% to lightning damage. Then we'll take Meditation for faster mana recovery, as well as Imbued Takedowns, which grants takedowns shocking weapons. This increases the electric damage of weapon attacks. The skill also outright buffs the shocking weapons damage by 25%. We'll also scoop up Shellbreaker as well as Underestimated for some passive damage buffs. Heading back down, we'll also take Perfect Cast, mainly because it's a gateway to a few additional skills we'll want, but also because it increases our charged weapon damage by 50% if we're efficient with the new mechanic it adds to our combat. Then we'll take Wrath, as well as Reclamation, which grants mana back after defeating enemies, which is essential for larger, more chaotic group encounters. We'll pick up Amperage to further increase our electric damage, and then moving up, we'll also take Killer Instinct as well as Shocking Strikes, which enhances all strike abilities, granting their attacks the ability to apply shock and electric damage over time effect on nearby enemies. If you're keeping track at home, that means takedowns and perfect blocks grant shocking weapons at this point. From here, we'll head down towards the specialization, picking up Underestimated. Then we'll take Pressure Point, which grants Quickened whenever we land a crit with a strike ability. Quickened allows abilities to refresh more quickly. On the other side, we'll take Staggering Charge, as well as both Breacher and Staggering Strikes, two skills that enhance either our strike abilities or our blast abilities. Next, we're going to take Storm Surge, an area and strike ability that deals electric damage and applies Overwhelm, an effect that makes enemies take more stagger damage. Storm Surge is also our main ability that functions on a cooldown and doesn't cost mana. As we keep heading down, we'll take another Shellbreaker. Then we'll pick up Spirit Blade, which is a huge part of how this build operates. Spellblade essentially gives you the ability to use a heavy attack as part of a light attack chain, which also gives it the added benefit of triggering your Arcane Bombs. For those that are unaware, Arcane Bomb is an essential part of any mage playstyle. When you use a light attack, an Arcane Bomb is added to the enemy target. Once you have 3 Arcane Bombs stacked up, you can use a heavy attack to detonate the Arcane Bomb for a burst of damage. At this point, we'll pick up the Spellblade, our specialization. Within the specialization, we'll actually take everything, but as you progress, you'll be gated based on your level. The first pickup is obviously Thunderous End, which is an electric-based ultimate ability. Then we'll take Void Blade, which is, in my opinion, one of the best mage abilities in this game. This is a strike and blast spell that deals electricity damage across 2 mana nodes, applies Sundered, which increases the damage enemies take from all sources, and can act as a detonator in harmony with a companion primer ability. You'll be forced to start on the right side of the tree. We'll start with Deterioration. Then we'll pick up Arcane Strike. With this skill, all strike abilities will apply an Arcane Bomb. Next, we'll take Veil Flurry, which is a fun attack combination modifier that adds an AoE component to a light attack combo. Then we'll pick up Antivan Kiss. as well as electrical burns, which essentially allows us to dot every enemy with both shocked and burning, no matter what type of spell we use, either lightning or fire-based. Finally, we'll pick up Shocking Tactician, which allows us to passively trigger a small electric-based AoE around targeted enemies. Since the other side of the tree starts off inaccessible while leveling, we'll head back up and continue expanding to the left side of the skill tree. We'll start with Essence Eater, which rewards us with health and ultimate charge whenever we perform a takedown. Then we'll take Velocity. Next, we'll pick up Return Fire, which is great in harmony with Imbued Reaction, further emphasizing the importance of parrying enemy attacks. Then we'll head down and pick up Bigger Blast, which enhances our Arcane Bomb. The next skill is a big one, Inner Focus, which rewards us with 25% more mana back whenever we use a successful light attack on an enemy. The value is even doubled when that enemy is suffering from an affliction, which just means any damage over time effect, which happens constantly with this build. Then we'll take Wrath. Next is Meteor, which is an area and blast ability that deals fire damage and applies Sundered to enemies. Meteor will also detonate primed enemies, and in combination with the Energy Burst window, deals even more damage than the tooltip would lead us to believe. You'll also want to pick up Demolisher, which seems insignificant, but actually gives us the ability to stack 2 sets of 3 Arcane Bombs on a single target, blowing them up for even more damage. At this point, we're going to head back down to our specialization and pick up our final set of skills, starting with Finale. Then we'll pick up Blast Efficiency, which makes the cost of both Meteor and Voidblade more tolerable. Next, we'll take Spirit of Vengeance, which allows you to throw out your Spirit Blade a second time if you time it correctly. Remember, Spirit Blade is that enhanced light attack combination that strings together 3 light attacks and 1 heavy attack. With Spirit of Vengeance, you now get 2 heavy attacks at the end of that combo. Then we'll take another Demolisher, which brings our total Arcane Bomb stacks up to 3. To make this better, we'll take Conductivity, which allows any remaining Arcane Bombs on defeated enemies to jump to a nearby target. And of course, Orbital Burst, which makes Arcane Bombs deal 100% damage and significant stagger in a small AoE around an exploding target. With your skills locked in, you've got a foundation for this build, but gear also becomes a huge factor. We could point out every piece we think is best, but because finding gear isn't consistent in Veilguard, we think it's better to tell you what types of gear to focus on. As far as your weapons are concerned, your dagger and orb will do a majority of the heavy lifting. Since the orb is your elemental attack, you'll want that to synergize with the skills that you've selected, which means something either fire or electric based. You can make an argument for a few different orbs. The important part, though, is to just stay within the school of magic we're enhancing with those skills. There's also a good number of daggers, and in my opinion, you'll want something that really augments your damage potential. A few good options are Thorn of Misfortune, which is just insane at higher rarities and plays perfectly into this build. Other options are the Time-Worn Mage Knife, which enhances Arcane Bomb, or even Enchanted Aethum, which is more about regenerating mana, ultimately giving you access to your abilities faster. When it comes to your staff, this is where it gets complicated, but there are 2 rules of thumb here. First is to choose a staff that doesn't have fire or electric damage. That sounds counterintuitive, but you want something that's effective against enemies that are resistant to fire or electric attacks. This is when you whip out the staff and take those enemies off the board. You'll also want something that enhances your overall kit. Staff effects should provide broad buffs to the mage overall, increasing crit, mana regen, something like that. You don't want to pick something that just increases staff damage, as you won't be using it often. Things get a little more fluid when it comes to your armor and accessories. There's no one right answer here, but again, there are guidelines that I think are important to follow. For your helm and chest, you'll want to emphasize ability damage. A large chunk of your damage is going to come from your core abilities, so maximizing that with gear is essential. It's also great to emphasize stagger. There's so much connected to stagger within this build that you really can't go wrong by stacking pieces of gear that fill up that enemy stagger bar more quickly. Of course, anything that's going to increase your electric damage is also solid here, as that's a centerpiece of the build. Finally, you're looking for gear that's going to make you more effective offensively, whether that be crit chance, crit damage, weapon damage, anything in that realm. While not a huge factor, when you're trying to sneak out every advantage, you'll also want to consider your rune. There are plenty in the game to choose from. Now remember, you can have 3 equipped at any one time, stacking those passive bonuses, but only one rune can be activated at a time. That's why it's important to build around the trio while having a solid main rune for its active effect. In this build, it's Ravage, which is my active rune, increasing damage against health. Then I equip Escalate, which passively increases my ability damage, and finally I go with a utility rune in Overflow, which gives me +1 to maximum potions. What I really love about this Spellblade build is just how fluid it is. Because of the energy burst skill, there's a real ebb and flow to the combat that just works well, given that the Spellblade is already naturally playing faster than the other mage specializations. The key is to swing back and forth between your electric and fire active abilities, taking full advantage of that 15% damage increase window. Things will almost always start with Storm Surge since the ability doesn't require mana, and your first instinct after that spell should be to use Meteor. That'll trigger Energy Burst again, and when you have the mana, you can unleash Void Blade. At that point, you most likely won't have the mana to recast anything, so the pendulum will reset, and you'll start the rotation over with Storm Surge when it's ready. In the gaps, you'll want to use your Dagger and Orb, taking advantage of the Spirit Blade, and subsequently Spirit of Vengeance, which lets you send out a blade a second time. This is going to do a majority of your damage outside of abilities, and you'll see rather quickly just how strong that is. Don't forget about parries and takedowns either. Those will both give you shocking weapons, which just further increases your electric damage on enemies and synergizes well with various skills. This Spellblade build plays fast, which I personally love, but it does take some getting used to. You're constantly within reach of enemies, which you might not love, but you can't argue with the results, and the damage numbers, they do not lie. So there you have it, our Spellblade mage build for Dragon Age the Veilguard. If you guys like this build or want to suggest another one, leave us a comment down below. And of course, if you appreciate everything that goes into making these guides, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.